talk about the making of a market and how the market changed for the women painters. And it's been a huge success. I think one of the interesting things to see, you can have a group of dedicated artists working very hard, creating work that they love, they believe in, and it might be marvelous stuff. That doesn't mean it's going to sell or people are going to know about it or find out about it. We're all very familiar with the desire these days for people to go viral with stuff. You put up a YouTube video, wouldn't it be cool if you went viral? There's actually money in going viral. 100,000 people see your piece, you might actually make some serious money at it. So there's a way in which Mithila art went viral. And I think it's interesting to look at how that came about and what the art was like and how it's changed as a result of that. Building a market is not the same thing as being an artist. I mean, if we sort of look at some of the biographies of some of our great artists, one thing say Picasso, but actually any of them, they had to know you had to have a market. During the early period, the Renaissance, the succeeding generations, they knew who their market was. Their market was rich patrons who were decorating their household chapels, or they were cathedrals. How did you make a market out of Mithila art? Nobody was paying the women who painted those walls in Mithila. They were women of the household. They brought the styles they learned growing up in a different village, brought it to a new household, so there was a little mixing of styles, but nobody was paying them. There was no market there. In fact, nobody could have imagined paying for collie. I mean, maybe actually occasionally they would bring in possibly somebody from another household that might owe a favor or be in a kind of a judgment relationship with the main household. But it was not commercial. It was not a commodity. And the women who turned to this weren't doing it out of reverence for a great art tradition they were a part of. They did that on the walls. What they needed was money because this was a very impoverished part of India. Bihar is still considered the poorest part of India, one of the poorest and most conservative states. And that's still true. It hasn't stopped being true. Most of the great development and modern India that we hear about today and the people who come here to work in Silicon Valley, they're coming from the big cities. I mean, there are actually some Maito Brahmins here. They've been well educated, but they're not living in Darbhanga. They're not living in Madhubani. Living in Calcutta, in Delhi, in Bangalore, in the great cities, and especially in the south. So when the women of Mithila began to be encouraged to try out the paper art, it was desperation that drove them to do it. I mean, these were the people who, in the 19th century, these Brahmin and Kayast women had starved in their households rather than to go out and take handouts from the British. They couldn't be seen by the British. And there's a lot of documentation about the starvation of the women. And when the art first began to be done in these villages, there were many Brahmin households who were quite reluctant. I talked to men, didn't want their women making money. It's not what Brahmins do. And so it fell to a few villages around Madhubani that were poor and that weren't in this elite level, who were willing to try it. And most of these women, all but one of them, the first most famous of these early artists, were widows. One of them, Sita Devi, wasn't a widow, but anyway, So it was about building a market, let's be frank. It was about money. But they got with the program. They were happy. It changed many of their lives, because now suddenly women could, women who weren't allowed to be educated, women my age and younger, had fought to get even a high school education. One of my closest friends there described having her father had gone to the London School of Economics, or her grandfather, London School of Economics, had a PhD in economics, was an important politician in Bihar, was a congressman, a member of the, not called parliament, but was a congressman. And she was given an elementary education at a school in Patna, English medium, sometimes thought her English was better than mine. When she came to graduate from high school, her father called from the village, from Darbhanga, to say, "Come home, your marriage is being arranged." She had wanted to go on and become a doctor, become a physician. She cried and cried. She didn't want to go marry this man, but she had to go home. And she did marry him. I met her when she had her first son. And she told me, "It's not a happy marriage. My husband isn't too bright." It's not maybe nice things to say about your spouse. My husband's not too smart. But she'd never think of leaving him, heavens. She did finally come very close to getting a PhD. I showed you a picture of her, actually. She was standing out front of the Maharaja's Kobragar. She finally came very close to getting a PhD. She had her dissertation all written. She wanted to get a university position teaching at Mithila University in Darbhanga. The politics of getting a position there were such that no woman, and not even a Brahmin at this point, but above all, no woman was going to get hired. So she took her dissertation out in the backyard and burned it. I heard about this 2 years later. "Oh, Putul, you didn't." Yes, I did. So now she's spent the rest of her life teaching. I don't know how she would evaluate her life now. She spent the rest of her life teaching at an English medium school in Darbhanga. We're friends on Facebook. Strange way things are. We're now I'm friends on Facebook with a lot of these people now. And during the Women's March 2 Saturdays ago, she posted a picture of herself and her female students standing out holding hands, having a demonstration. I wrote and said, it was wonderful. I wrote and said, "Putul, is this part of the International Women's March?" She wrote back, "It's for awareness of prohibition." I don't know what that meant. I think it meant alcohol prohibition, so maybe it was and maybe it wasn't about the march, but usually she posts things when she wants me to hear about them, so it was. Anyway, let's be real about the market. It's very interesting, good art, and it's about making money, and it's about women's empowerment, and it's about a lot of other things as well. So, we're talking economic development here. And here I am sitting on a bed, the cot, in the house of Boa Devi in Jitwarpur, the famous village, and she's showing me her many snakes. And actually that's Putul sitting right there with her head cut off, showing me some of her many snakes. I say this market was developed with a little help from our friends, from friends, and I don't want to understate the significance of what the women themselves are producing. That's mostly what I'm going to talk about, the significance of what they're producing. But it took some assistance to build the international market so that all you people could know about this and be here. And this is true in Europe. Everybody knows about Mithila art. There's a whole museum about it in Japan. So it did take a very large effort on the part of a lot of people to make this go viral. Didn't just happen. So here's one of the people who helped. This is, if If you look closely, the man sitting there, he's holding a work of Mithila art on paper, see? Who is that guy? That's Ray Owens. He's an applied anthropologist who worked closely in Bihar and in Jitwarpur. He helped to found the Ethnic Arts Foundation, which is centered here in San Francisco. David Zanton, you're not here by any chance, David Zanton? He runs it now. And they've done great things. They're running a school of Mithila art now these days I think it's in Madhubani. But Ray Owens was a saint. I think he's a saint, cultural anthropologist, and I suspect that's supposed to be his wife behind him. His wife was also, they lived there for a year in Jitwarpur to help this village. They established a sort of a personal relationship with Jitwarpur. You people paint, and anything you paint, we will buy and bring it to the United States and try to find buyers. And we will send most of the money back to you. So they sort of did this on spec. And he brought, in that way, over about 10 years, hundreds of amazing works that this village produced. And gradually they got more and more original in what they could do. They experimented with new themes and topics, some of which I'll be showing soon. And then I think Ray had some heart problems and some money problems, like we all do, trying to keep this work alive. And when I went there in when I went there in 96, they said, well, we haven't seen him in 10 years. And I saw him again shortly after that in Berkeley, and then he died a few years after that. But he, you can tell they love him. Look at what they did. They put him in their art. And look at what he's doing. He's buying, who's he buying from? That's a man sitting there. He's not buying directly from a woman. He's buying probably from a husband. And looks like a Vidkari. You'd expect to see her in a marriage painting, standing over in the corner with a fan, waving in the heat. But it's a beautiful work. So people like Ray Owens did a lot to help in making this work go viral. So here's just some of the things that went on in order to, I think I got a picture here. Yeah, I'll save that one. So Erika Moser in the 1970s was a German anthropologist. A lot of anthropologists got involved in this early on. She was a German anthropologist who took a lot of the art and, in fact, some of the artists to Germany, made a film, and introduced this art. She sometimes tried to get the women to do not just paper art, but wall art, to reproduce in German galleries something of what the art looked like when it was on the walls in India. So she did that. Ray Owens, I've already discussed, Ethnic Arts Foundation, brought hundreds of works, got it on the cover of academic journals and academic conference programs, many of them over the years. Yves Cole was a Frenchman, and he wrote this book, which is a fascinating book. If you ever discover it, you can get it used. Now, the name has changed, actually. It's now called The Women Painters of Mithila, but it still has the same image on the front. Beautiful illustrations of paper art and wall art. But if you read the text, totally made up. I mean, he calls this place a matriarchy, where the women get to choose their own husbands. And the way they do this is they draw a little painting and give it to the man they're in love with, and then the marriage is arranged. Nothing like this could ever happen in Mithila. So don't read the text, but look at the art. It's marvelous. And I found this book everywhere in Mithila. It's become a sort of painter's guide, a student guide. I see them torn apart in pages of it, and they copy pages. This is how they learn to paint on how many of the young women learn to paint on paper. They copy the pictures from this book. Let's see. Yeah, here I'm sitting out front of Sita Devi's house in the sun, and she has the book open to her painting that was on that page in that book. So very proud she was to be in that book. And then films. University of Wisconsin made a film, and some French people came and made a film, and some Japanese came and made a film. And I seem to have been in Mithila on 2 different occasions just after a film crew had been there, where all the village lanes and everything was painted to make a good movie. And like I say, it wasn't the way it used to be, but it's the way it was when you're trying to go viral. Hotel murals, calendars, lots of, there's a whole calendar art tradition in India, totally different kind of art. But I've seen Mithila art on calendars and UNESCO gift cards and trips for the artists. Some of these artists have been to the United States, and some of them, they've been to Europe, they've been to Japan. When I was at Boa Devi's house, she showed me a contract that the Japanese had just sent her. And the details were filled in, what they were going to provide, what they weren't going to provide. She had to be sure to bring a sweater, things like that. She wondered if they were paying her enough. So it was interesting to see that contract. The government, the state of Bihar, the government of India have created these awards, and those awards bring fame to these women. Sita Devi had about 7 of those. And here's one I'm sort of proud of. This is my photograph. I'd be more proud if it was my book. It's actually a book by Heidi Poles, but the Goddess's role model. So I've seen Mithila art on the cover of many, many books about India. It's just everywhere. How it's astonishing. It is really the single most famous and most currently living art traditions, I think it's fair to say, going on now in India. Okay, so I'm just going to mention a few of the ways in which the market changed the art and changed the lives of the women. First of all, it did create an early group of celebrity painters whose names became known, who people go to see, who get invited to on international jaunts to display their pictures. It created a star village, Jitwarpur. This was Ray Owen's village. This village more or less became a total production factory for Mithila art. It produced wonderful stuff. And you should, I don't know if you'll ever get an opportunity, I gave a lecture there in 1998 or so, and afterward, Ray Owens was there, and they took me down and they pulled out all of their holdings. I was blown away by all this marvelous stuff. Because the only stuff I've seen from Jitwarpur is stuff that I saw when I was in Jitwarpur. I hadn't really had access to all this great stuff that Ethnic Arts Foundation and Ray Owens was collecting. So it was stunning what they had done. I don't really have access to that, so I'm not really talking about that collection, but someday you should get someone in here to talk about that collection. Fame and income altered the lives of these women. They told me what a difference it had made. And I'll tell you some of those stories in a minute. And I emphasized at the beginning how this tradition came out of the wall art of these 2 dominant castes in a more conservative time in India, in Bihar. It has now expanded. And not just women, and not just high caste women, but women of all castes, and even men, are involved in this art. And that has been a very interesting thing, and one of the ways it's changed things is the themes that they pick. Men paint different themes from women. The other castes paint themes that would never have shown up on Brahmin or caste walls. So it's expanded the thematic variation of that art. And finally, it has really turned this art into a kind of regional culture that everybody feels proud of and is connected to. For example, I'm showing an art school on the rooftop of a house in Darbhanga, and the students here are simply from sort of middle class, not caste we're saying, middle class families of multiple castes living in Darbhanga, merchants' daughters, and it's still girls here, but they're mixing, they're laughing, they're painting together, sort of like taking ballet lessons at a certain age in the US. Everybody, all the girls want to be properly educated in this skill. Not doing piano lessons, not doing ballet, they're doing Mithila art. And everybody is proud of this. And there had not been previously a sense of co-identity shared across Mithila. As I described, maybe too vividly at the beginning, how caste-bound, caste-riddled it was in the old days. It's not entirely gone. People still vote their caste. But this art has helped to change that. So here's one of the first things I noticed. I think I took this in 1980. This is the village of Ranti, which is not Jitwarpur, it's nearby. This is what women were doing, and look at how beautiful. You can see they're doing the line art. Ranti is a village that was sort of famous for this style of art. So the women are doing line art. You see over there, you got two little ink pots, one of black and one of red. And that's what they're doing here. That's what they're using. Okay, here's one of our first original celebrity artists, Jagdamba Devi. She was a daughter of Jitwarpur, long before this village began to paint. She had gone to her marriage at the age of 8 or 9, very young. Her husband died before the wedding was completed. Never mind, she was a widow. She came back to this village, spent her whole life as a widow, and fortunately was there when the Pupil Jayakar came with paper and encouraging women to paint. So she began painting. So she's one of the first ones. She won several big national awards. She was so honored. I bought that painting from her in 1980. When I came back in 1984, she had just died and they were performing her funeral ceremonies. So I didn't see her again after that. But she had a life toward the end enriched by this art tradition. Here we go. And here's Sita Devi. I've been mentioning her a lot. She's probably the most famous of all of this first generation. She's quite old now. The first time I went to India, she wasn't there. She was in Delhi painting a huge mural at the airport. But I met her on several later trips. And she's showing you, okay, notice Eve Vaco's book open there to her page, her painting. But there's Bihar Ratan, there's the All India Award, there's a medal, there's a statue. These are all the awards that the government has given to honor her work. And she died, I think, in 2006. She lived a very long life into her 90s. And here's Boa Devi. She's still had a living husband, but she's done very, very well with her art. She was making good money. She had a television, no car, but she did have a television. Nobody had a car, but a couple of televisions now in this village. And she was maybe the most famous at that point. And here's just a scene. So they wouldn't traditionally have painted the steps going down to the pond where you wash your laundry and your pots, but for that film crew, they had done that. But beautiful painting going down from Sita Devi's house down. Oh, I was going to tell you a story about Sita Devi. Let me back up. She told me that when she first started painting, all these people would come to the village to see her. And her husband didn't like this at all. He was sort of grumpy, she said. I was famous. Everybody knew my name. I went to Delhi. She also went to the United States, went to Washington, D.C., and she's been to Germany. And her husband went along as her husband. Because he didn't like it, she said. But eventually he got used to it. Guess why? He liked the money. So it has definitely empowered women. People go here not to... You've got to realize this whole area was famous for the learnedness of the Brahmins. Since Vedic times, Indian philosophy, much of it had its center here. These men were famous Sanskrit scholars. I could show you, I'm not showing you, I could show you a lot of slides of the Brahmin men having shastrartas, having debates, and they were famous for their writings, and their women were kept illiterate. And now, it's the women whose work has gone viral, and I don't know how many people really read the philosophical writings of the Brahmins who are still doing that, which not that many are anymore. So this is an interior, Jitwarpur, okay. Like I said, Ray Owen's village, he made this connection with this Village Ethnic Arts Foundation, and I'll just show you some scenes, because it really became a, what do you want to say, a star, a token village, but I'm going to hurry up a little bit here. So here's a village lane scene painted by, they got the whole village busy painting for this film crew that came through, but you can see what these houses all look like. Okay, some women sitting on the veranda out front. This is the crowd around Sita Devi's house. Okay, next I'm going to show, I've pulled about a dozen paintings from your collection here. And I think what this will illustrate is some of the variation in themes that has come about because more people are now painting. It isn't just this one group of, a couple of casts that sort of dominated the art, but everybody is in on the picture. So here's Durga. I think this is on the cover of your brochure, isn't it? Is this the one? Yeah. So this is Sita Davies' work. Don't need to say more about that, probably. Arlington Cemetery. She was very impressed when she went to Washington, D.C., and you can see the tombstones, the main building at Arlington, and then these astonishing trees on the side, very stylized. But as some of these women artists have traveled, they've tried to incorporate some of the amazing things they've seen into their work. Here's Boa Devi again. I didn't realize she had a daughter who died until I saw this painting in your collection. Painted in 1977, so these are all sort of from that first generation. Your whole collection actually is from that first major generation of painters. But there's Yama, the god of death, and there's probably supposed to be Boa Devi with her daughter sick. Then on the other side, her daughter has died, and I guess those are flames. Her body's been burned, so Yama has taken her daughter. So they're painting their lives, and in some cases, these are painful scenes they're painting. And Shiva Lingam, so Boa Devi's famous for her snakes, but the ling is the symbol of Shiva, his erect phallus, although don't say that in India because they deny it. I've sort of tried to run this scholarly interpretation by Hindus in India, and they totally reject it, so we won't go there. But Shiva, you can see his face there, but those are all, they make these, during Madhushravan, this one summer festival that's to protect from snakes, they make these little heaps of mounds where they offer sacrifice, offer offerings to the snakes to please them, but to keep them away. So I believe that that's what is being portrayed here, but her work is very more abstract than most, less directly representational than most. Here's Lalita Devi. She's another one of the famous ones, and I love, there's more action going on in this picture than I've ever seen in any work of Mithila art. So these women here are playing holy. That is to say, they've got their bottles of colored water, and they're running around, throwing the water at each other. Look at this, hang on. Look at the movement here. Look at how she's done this woman's legs. Her skirts are just flying. and the spray of water going up here, and here's more spray of pink water. Notice it's line drawing, so it's black and red entirely. But they're having a marvelous time, and you can definitely see the motion in this painting. And this is Lalita Devi again, and this is a portrayal, also that line drawing, two-color, of the ceremony of Madhushravan, so still painting their experiences, their ritual lives, the things that they do on an annual basis, so every August this happens. But here's the parane again up here, and the buns, the aquatic art, and the sun god Surya, and here's Hati the elephant, and down here's the bride and groom. So I could spend a lot of time unpacking this one. And here's Ma Sundari Devi, a Kayasta painter from Ranti village. Spent a lot of time with her in 1984, but this is a very formulaic version of the lotus leaf and the pond, the aquatic life. When I first saw this one, I sort of gasped, because this is a demon, a boot, a demon, as you can tell. She's real scary, creepy looking. Look at those fingernails. Look at those staring eyes. The eyes are, people worry about the evil eye. The evil eye, you can project evil onto children, onto people from jealousy, that they don't want, when they're eating in the village, they don't want people who aren't eating staring, watching them eat. The evil eye may be coming to them. There's demons around, evil witches, and I was shocked to see this drawing because it would never show up on a wall in a wedding. Way too dangerous. You actually bring to life on your wall like she's a goddess, an evil spirit. I'm guessing this is done by somebody outside that tradition, but I did stop to think about another kind of being, spiritual or a godling might be a word for this. On this side of the line, on the left, this is, hang on. This is from William Archer's photography. Look at the face. Look at the triangular face. Only one eye showing. The veil is covering the other eye. She's got a pot on her head and a bird there. She's something in that pot. Here is a detail from this painting that this woman did. I showed you the whole thing earlier. Durga's on the side. Here's the same figure, Naina Yogin. The eyes, it means something like a yogi, yogin, female yogi with the dangerous eyes. You'd think that's like this boot over here, but it's not. This goddess is there to help the bride have control over her husband, to be sure he doesn't overpower her, to be sure he isn't cruel to her, and to keep his affections focused on her. And at an actual wedding, hey, I did this, look there. At an actual wedding, when the groom arrives, there's a woman dressed up like Naina Yogin with her sari over her face, a pot on her head, and she's a live impersonation of this figure. Here's the groom coming for the first time. Tricky moment. We hope our bride is going to be up to this guy. And then they put him through some paces. They pinch his nose and they do some other stuff to sort of ridicule him or to keep him under control. So this figure is some kind of village godling, if that's a decent word, not so good really, but totally different function from this. This is an unprocessed, uncontrollable, dangerous witch. You do not want her at your wedding. Sort of like, I won't go there. Okay. Here's a painting of Govind Maharaj, who is worshipped by the Dusads. So I'm guessing Shanti Devi, the artist, might be a member of the Dusad community, and she's portraying their deity, which is one of the ways in which this art tradition is opening up to the cultural traditions of the other caste communities of Mithila, which is a very good and powerful sign, I think, of the way in which there's some equalizing going on here, or some larger community being created around Mithila art. And I have to say, when I went back in, I think this was 96, when I photographed him, I was shocked. So a guy horning in on Mithila art. Like, wouldn't you know it, as soon as it gets big, the men take it over? But I had to have a little talk with myself. My job as an anthropologist is not to disapprove of guys horning in. It's to figure out what's going on, how's it working now. So he's a very big name, Krishnanand Jha. I had bought some stuff from him and had it framed, and haven't really hung it yet, but I've got it. And he does very interesting work, but again, this is male culture stuff. So you see the chakras, here we got a yogi here, and here's the 6 chakras beginning, go back. This one, beginning at the base of the kundalini, all that. This is male culture, this is tantra. Male scholars and Brahmins in Bihar, the old Maharajas, were fascinated. It was said there was a tantric shrine in the basement of the palace. In the 1930s, a Maharaja was said to be a tantric. I've got a whole paper about that if you want to read it. Pretty dense. But the women don't know about this. This isn't what the women do. This is based on tantric texts and male ritual practices, very esoteric stuff that only very few men have been involved in, very elite as well. Women don't paint this. So we're definitely getting, and if you look here, what he's got here, these are tantric designs too. So if you read about, esoteric Hinduism and the tantric tradition, and of course it's all over the internet, and the West has been fascinated. Victorian gentlemen were particularly fascinated with all of this. That's male culture, and it's not what the women are up to. The women are painting their lives. And Gopal Saha is another, I love his work. The colors are very different, very strong, vivid colors, but look at the theme here. We got a train up at the top. Very cool train, actually, and it appears to be a family going on vacation. So, husband, wife, and the kids, ubiquitous trees, so we don't have any empty spaces. And they seem to be going into a hotel or something, and they're giving some money to the hotel wala. How a modern family might be spending vacation time. This is a new theme. Didn't used to have that. Although William Archer, in his black and white photographs, did have a train scene way back in 1940, so it's not that new. But the colors are very, notice we don't have that pink anymore. We got this beautiful vivid red, sort of a brick red, and a really nice yellow. These are all commercial poster paints. They don't ever mix their paints. They buy these paints in little trays, little tin trays, and someday maybe there'll be paint mixing. Who knows where this art is going to go? But I think it's marvelous. Here, I'm almost done. They're still painting their lives, but their lives have changed. So this picture is a small picture from a set of calendar pictures advocating female literacy. Teach your children to read. And here's the girls, middle-class girls, up on the rooftop, enjoying painting. And now I'm going to actually close with these two paintings that I took off the internet. And it shows just how different the art is now, what new stuff is coming. These are both stories that I'm going to show you. So here's a story. The artist heard about it in her village. It's like a cartoon reading across. So here I go up here. Up above, a girl of high caste has a tutor who's a low-caste boy, but they fall in love. And notice the little hearts between them, floating between them. Somebody overhears their words of love and goes to the village pond and gossips about it to all the other women. I mean, the well. Gossips about to the other women. Her family, look at her mother crying tears. You cannot marry that boy. Her father's outraged, his hands up in the air. She's crying. So you have to marry a man of your own caste. So here they arrange her wedding. She's got to marry a man of her own caste. And here's her wedding to that man. She's sitting in the little shrine they set up for her. But she's so unhappy that she sets herself on fire and burns herself to death. The relatives are so angry, they find the boy she's in love with and beat him. And he is so distressed that he hangs himself from a fan. Well, this is heavy. So altogether new stuff happening. And then the last one, I think this is so beautiful, but look what's going on again. So here we're inside a house. Here is a bride whose family has not come through with all the dowry. Her husband is pouring gasoline on her. Her mother-in-law is about to light the flame. Meanwhile, the village women got wind of what's coming down. They all come up to the house to rescue her. One woman pours gasoline on the mother-in-law, and this one is about to light the flame. I have no idea where this art is going. But somebody's been empowered along the way. So thank you. That's all I have to say.